Hello and welcome to the CX Files podcast. I'm your host, Mark Hillary. This week I'm talking to one of the leading British experts on what is going on in the retail industry at present. That's certainly a question we're reading about frequently in the business media right now. Pat O'Brien is the UK Research Director at GlobalData Retail and has a long career researching retail trends in the UK and across Europe. GlobalData publishes over 15,000 reports and forecasts a year, analysing 500,000 companies in 80 different countries. In short, they're really well known for the depth of their thought and analysis. I talked with Pat about retail in 2019 and how the customer experience is influencing the wider retail industry. Okay, so let's go straight to the interview. Okay, Pat. So many retailers, in the UK and beyond, they're trying to optimize and understand their customer journey more effectively. But it's clear that improving customer service and customer experience is not their only challenge. Can you summarize? I know it's a big story, but perhaps summarize why there are so many retailers that seem to be in trouble at the moment, even if they are delivering great service.
Yeah, I think that's true. It's a fair assessment. I think, though, pretty much all of the challenges affecting retail are about the response to online. Now, it shouldn't really be that way because e-commerce isn't exactly new, is it? But this is a revolution in retailing, and the effects of it continue to be felt for many years. Retail profits have been continually falling. If you take an average, and we've done some consulting work, we've looked at this, and retail profits have been on a very gradual decline, over the last 15 years. And they're falling because the traditional retailers have had to invest in online, ostensibly to service the same customers. So everyone talks about omni-channel retailing and being able to understand their customer journey, but it's extremely expensive to get right. And customers are using multiple channels. They're switching between stores and online. And they're using social for customer service, online chat, etc. Before, you just built a store and people would come. And now many of those sales are dependent upon having best-in-class customer experience across these retail channels. And that becomes extremely expensive.
So the customers as a whole are not actually spending more, but it costs more to serve them.
That's exactly right. Yeah. But at the same time, they're not able to increase their increased prices because online, makes that price and specification comparison makes it very difficult for retailers to be able to build premium into their pricing because the customer is in control and they want it all. And building operating margins in such an environment is extremely tough.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so as an industry, there's clearly some challenges, omni-channel, internet, e-commerce, as you mentioned. But have you seen any examples of brands that are managing to swim against this tide of complexity and difficulty, perhaps because they're focusing on their customer experience?
Well, I think there are a few, but I think even those players can struggle at times. In the UK, for example, John Lewis has always been held as a shining example, and department stores are struggling. But John Lewis has always been a great example of this in terms of its omni-channel retailing. But it never had a massive store network in the first place, so it wasn't hampered in the way that so many traditional retailers have been because they've signed up to extremely long leases before they realised how big online retail would become. While John Lewis, of course, had a smaller number of stores, but it's consistently done it right in the way that it's approached omni-channel and the way that it's integrated those channels together. But they're having challenges themselves, and they're struggling to make a profit, and they're having to move away from branded products because of the comparison issue that I mentioned earlier. So, at the moment they're moving away from branded product, kind of get more exclusive products with brands and go to our own label. But there are some retailers that are doing well, and those are the ones that are very targeted and understand their customer and put them first and build the strategy around them. For example, Ted Baker, for example, I know that they've been in the press for all the wrong reasons recently, but they've been extremely successful. Everything they've done has been centered around the customer experience. And you look at that and how different that is from, it's a completely different sector, but look at IKEA. IKEA is a retailer that's had to change so drastically over the last few years because it built its whole retail model around the idea that you do things the IKEA way, and the customers have to adapt to the retailer. And now they realise that there's no way that can be sustainable because the customer is in control of everything, and the customer demands how they shop. And now IQ is having to completely change and think about its business model, start to think about small stores, have to think about offering click and collect, have to think about all these other things of integrating online and the store experience, rather than these great big blue boxes which people funnel through a maze. They're really having to reconsider everything about their business model.
Okay, so if we're even seeing brands like IKEA, John Lewis, etc., changing their business model, are we going to see a change in the way that retail itself works, and perhaps different business models such as subscriptions? I mean, companies like Dollar Shave Club come to mind. I mean, will this idea of direct to the consumer become more common?
Well, I think it will. I think every manufacturer that starts off, they want to start off direct selling before they even bring in retail partners now, because it allows them to get early feedback as they develop. But it's very, very difficult for those startups, those D2C startups, to really get traction because of the costs of marketing. Mattress manufacturers, the bed in a box manufacturers, these are a good example, really, because they've really found it hard to build that brand from scratch. Look at Eve Sleep and Simba. They've really struggled with the expense of marketing, and what they've had to do is start to partner with traditional retailers to really get their brands up. But there are some spectacular successes. Dollar Shave Club is an absolute standout one. There's another one, for example, Gymshark. They make gym kit for the self-obsessed. They're a good example. They've really built up sort of the great use of social media, understanding what makes its particular target market tick, and building up a buzz. And they've grown very, very rapidly on that model. But for retailers, the worry is that there's going to be more of the traditional brands going for D2C models, Nike, Adidas, and what have you, that are building out their D2C operations, building those relationships direct with consumers, cutting out the retailer entirely. Or, for example, the phone networks are really pushing this, they've been going for a D2C model for a long time, and as they build that up, they'll be able to reduce the terms on which they resell through to third parties, so making those negotiations with the likes of Dixon's Carphone in the UK. But in terms of other little models, I mean, there's always the threat of IoT models, this whole idea of the Internet of Things and a smart home. There's always these ideas that these are going to take off. The Internet fridge, for example, is an idea that just won't die, despite being, utterly ridiculous, in my opinion. Voice ordering had a lot of hype, but I think even Amazon don't really believe in it. But the subscription models are interesting. Retailers love them, don't they? Because automated ordering and just customer inertia, really. The idea that you sign up and then you've basically you've lost control. But it's very difficult to get people onto those models. Dollar Shave Club managed it. They did so by drastically undercutting the incumbent at the time, Gillette. So it's a very difficult thing to do. Amazon Dash buttons are always an interesting one, because they've taken this idea of automating or subscription model, but they've introduced an element of control in that you're pressing the button. So they're kind of, retailers like Amazon would love to get to that point where you don't need to think about what you need. It tells you what you need and delivers it to you, and then takes your money without you being in control at all. But I think consumers are really going to struggle with that. But the Dash button is almost kind of a halfway house. But it's a bit dangerous. I got offered last time I was on Amazon. I got offered a Dash button for Bushmills whiskey. And just the idea of having that next to my drinks cabinet is a very scary one. It's not something I'm going to adopt.
Well, I'm sure their AI system knows you well. Well, I mean, on that sort of topic, then, I mean, look at markets like China. I mean, if you look at apps like WeChat, the Chinese consumers have combined social media with messaging, with shopping, with payment systems, and it seems like they're years ahead of what we're doing. I mean, how do you think that the European or US market will be in, say, 5 years if we're going to start adopting that, like payment within apps that then combines e-commerce as well?
Yeah, well, that's an interesting one. They are ahead of us, and I can see that the winners in retail are really going to be those that invest in the full integration of the mobile experience with the store experience. So that you can pay direct on your mobile phone. You don't have to queue. You get more information from products by the awareness of the phone to where it is in the store or in relation to a product, and getting more information and other things to basically make the store journey more entertaining and more informative, more convenient. But the problem with all that is it's very, very expensive to do. And as we see, the high street is definitely in a long-term decline. Footfall's going to continue to decline. Retailers are going to continue to close stores. And what that means for the high street is effectively that you're going to have this sort of a polarization where the good retailers end up gathering together in premium locations. And then when people do go out to shop, they're going to do it less often. But when they do, they'll want to go to the places where the brands are, and that will increasingly be in fewer, more premium locations. And obviously, that's going to have a knock-on effect on sort of secondary high streets. Mm-hmm. And then there's going to be, what with the internet, you're going to see less of the aimless browsing in the physical world, because aimless browsing is something that gets done in the online world before you go to the shops. So even the amount of people who go to the shopping malls, it's going to be more difficult to get them into the stores. So it becomes more difficult, and the actual investment that's required then to make sure that when you get to get those stores, that you get the experience you want. Very difficult. Big brands are going to be able to make those, very big retailers, the likes of Amazon, and the Amazon Go model is a great example, isn't it? Integration of mobile, that focus completely on the customer and on the in-store experience, making it as convenient as possible. But that is a huge investment, and there's not really many retailers that are going to be able to afford to do that. There's going to be start-up retailers, but I think they'll tend to be niche, catering to the needs of a specific customer in a way that maybe larger retailers can't.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, then looking ahead to 2019. I mean, just as a summary, then, what should we be looking out for? What sort of changes or trends do you think we're going to see in retail this year?
2019. I mean, it's going to be a really tough year. I'm afraid it's going to be more of the same. We're going to see big retailers hitting the wall. We're going to see loads more physical store closures. In the UK, particularly, unfortunately, the economic and political uncertainty is really stopping people spending, especially big ticket items, things that can be put off until there's a bit more visibility. There's not a lot of good news, in fact, for retail in 2019, I'm afraid.
Okay. Well, on that positive note, we'll close the podcast then. Thanks very much, Pat.
No problem.
Thanks for listening to the CX Files podcast. Please take a moment to review the podcast, because this helps other listeners to find it. And if you have any suggestions, then get in touch with me on Twitter or LinkedIn. I'm @Mark Hillary with 2 L's, or just search Google for Mark Hillary.